Earlier, we talked about the 7 attitudes to nature, but what resonates with me the most is that they don't tell the whole picture. We're not tied to one thing. It is our attitudes change based on what we're facing, what situations we're facing in our day-to-day lives. And that's why there are high and there are low parts, or you can say there are 2 extremes in each of these attitudes. And noticing how we change between those is what brings us more self-awareness. And this is the book where the author wrote about the 7 attitudes to nature. And so let's go over them, each of them, and their respective extremes. First attitude, there is seeing nature as a resource to be exploited. At a low point of this attitude, we experience self-interest, being self-absorbed and only interested in my own need. At the high point, however, it is to share that natural resource with people, with others. And it is at that high point that we might break into our next attitude, which is a higher awareness, and that is seeing nature as objects to investigate. The lower extreme of the second attitude is being hyperactive and super focused on making discoveries, maybe perhaps sort of like a mad scientist. That's all I'm caring about right now. But the high point of this attitude is becoming respectful of nature. And perhaps that just comes from all the new discoveries that we've observed from this second attitude. And once again, at this high point, we break into the third level of awareness, and that is seeing nature as beings that mirror our own suffering. The low extreme of this is being very emotional, projecting all our own emotions onto nature. And that kind of reminds me of my teenage and early adult years. That's when I look for all kind of metaphors of my feelings and project that onto nature. But then the higher extreme of this romantic tendency is to aspiring to understand and also love nature. So kind of bringing in an emotional and a softer approach to this understanding. Now that brings us to the fourth attitude, which is seeing nature as beings to take care of. With love, at a low point, we are still kind of projecting our self-love and our own personality into nature. But at a high point, it is the love of nature as they are. You can think of this as the difference between loving nature as it is versus only loving sunny days because they're beautiful and hating rainy days because it's convenient. So this part of emotion is coming from our self-love, but if we love nature of its own, then we're more likely to see the beauty of any condition outside of our own human experience. Although the dislike of rainy days or whatever inconvenience, that's very legitimate. I'm struggling to love my beautiful white winter, snowy winter. But we can feel contradicting emotions for the same thing at the same time. That is legitimate. It's just different extremes of a kind of attitude. And then this type of love brings us to the fifth attitude, which is seeing nature as a source of power. Low point of this is wanting, again, to exploit and manipulate the power of nature. And the high point of this is experiencing the power as a catalyst of creativity and inspiration. So in this case, in the high point, we're welcoming its power, but we're not trying to control it or own it or giving it value only when we can use it to achieve something. That brings us to the sixth attitude, which is seeing nature as simply living beings. Very objective, it feels like, but not without feelings and empathy. At the lower extreme, we can consider human as the ultimate living being, very dogmatic and very self-centered. It's human species. But at the high point, we consider life as the ultimate experience, a bit removed from the human centeredness and human individuality. And that brings us to the seventh attitude, seeing nature as a part of the cosmic whole. At the low point, we pity ourselves on how maybe insignificant we are, but at the high point, we're ready to sacrifice and dedicate ourselves to the service of life. And so we are not any different or be above or below other life. That is the whole big picture we're seeing. And I will say, when I first read about this, the seven attitudes and the low and high points and how we might move around them, I thought that because I have a spiritual connection to nature, of course it would bring us to the highest awareness. But not only am I far from that, I also have some reserve about how I would describe that level of awareness. I think ultimately, really embracing ourselves as a part of the universe means we're not above any other types of life or human or nature. And that will for sure contradict with how I fight to stay alive. If I'm fighting for myself, then it's going to be a little bit of self-centeredness, or, for my community or my individuality. And that's why we're willing to sacrifice or kind of compromise our own comfort, and maybe even sacrificing our own our habits, how we feel like things have always been, and that's how it should continue to be. Sacrificing that kind of comfort is the sacrifice to serving the bigger picture of life. And so I'm definitely not at a high level of awareness, and I think that being this kind of sacrifice for life, being an unattainable level of awareness, that's not a bad thing at all. I think they just surface good questions for us to reflect on, and sometimes just by reflecting, it helps shape our decisions. We don't have to be entirely enlightened to say like having these awareness is helping us, is improving our lives, or helping us feel fulfilled. So I think the low and high extremes of these attitudes are very interesting and mostly relatable. I don't know about you, but I grew into awareness of nature pretty late, maybe my early 20s, not even my teens. Nature was everywhere around me when I was growing up, but it's so weird that I'm just not aware of that. And when this awareness developed, I think I was very much a romantic. I think that was the third attitude. Because, for example, learning about folklore, the fantasy aspect of it, the pagan and magical side of nature, those are all true to some extent, but they're also not very grounded if that's all I think about. In the later years, that's when I started developing awareness of the first and second attitudes. How it's one thing when you enjoy nature as a resource, the food, the furniture we got from wood. It's another thing when you don't even realize, you don't even think of it as a resource, you just think they're there. And so, seeing nature as a resource or as scientific objects to learn about, to observe, these are very important parts of having a spiritual connection to nature. So I couldn't skip that. I had to go back to and realize, oh, it's been there all the time. I just wasn't appreciating almost the physical level of their existence. It's so weird. So the reason I wanted to share this information from this book is it's called The Healing Energy of Trees. It's because it covers such a broad spectrum that I feel like anyone with any kind of relationship to nature can find something they can relate to. And whether you're a mystic or a farmer, as the author described the seven attitudes, there's so much work being done by so many people. I think there's enough of us sharing our experiences with nature, with the resources, and all those discoveries to deepen our relationship with nature. It's no longer a new thing to contemplate, to think about what is my attitude right now? Or why do I have this feeling? Why do I make this decision? What kind of attitude am I coming from? And sorry, I keep looking out because that's where all the pine trees are. But yes, it was very fun absorbing and digesting this information and then sharing it with you. If there are more topics you would like to hear about, leave it in the comments and subscribe to my channel for more. Thank you for being here.